Welcome to the AI Network News. Tonight we introduce Anthology AI.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something really wild?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so get this. We're talking about AI that could actually revolutionize how we do research, like behavioral studies and surveys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, imagine running those kinds of studies, but without needing actual people.
That's a fascinating idea. How would that even work?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. Researchers are working on a method they call Anthology.
Anthology?
Yep, and we're diving deep into their paper all about it. It's called Virtual Personas for Language Models via an Anthology of Backstories.
Okay, that title alone already has me intrigued.
Right. So basically, they're using these super powerful AI systems called large language models, the things behind chatbots.
Right.
And they're giving them unique personalities.
Wait, hold on. Personalities? Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, that's the really cool part. I mean, first, maybe you could remind us how these LLMs work in the first place.
Sure. So LLMs are trained on these massive amounts of text data. They basically absorb info from millions of different voices and sources.
Okay, so it's like they've read everything ever written.
Kind of, yeah.
So when you ask it a question, you're getting this, answer based on everything it's ever read.
Exactly. It's like this giant melting pot of opinions and perspectives,
And that creates a problem for researchers, right? I mean, if they want to use LLMs to actually simulate human behavior.
It does. Think of it this way. Imagine you're studying, say, how different age groups feel about online privacy.
Okay, yeah.
You wouldn't just want one generic answer that blends everybody's opinions together, would you? You'd want to see how, say, a teenager might think about it differently from someone in their 60s.
Totally. That makes sense. You need those nuances.
Right, and that's where Anthology comes in, is like, instead of retraining the whole LLM, they're giving them these individual personalities.
Okay, so how do they do that?
They use these really detailed backstories.
Backstories. So we're writing, like a whole novel for each AI?
Not a novel, haha, but it's not just, basic info like age and where they live. It's more about creating a whole life story with values, experiences, and even those little quirks that make us unique.
I'm trying to picture this. So they give the LLM this whole script of a personality to follow.
It is a bit like that. The idea is to give it that context and depth so its responses are more nuanced and, individual.
I see. But do you have an example? What does one of these backstories look like?
Oh yeah, there's this one in the paper that always sticks with me. It talks about someone who grew up poor, and they specifically remember their mom, choosing to buy roses instead of food.
Wow, that's powerful. Even just that tiny detail, you can already sense how their values might be different?
Exactly, and that's what allows the LLM to stop being just a blend of millions of voices. It becomes this unique, simulated person.
So they're making a whole cast of AI actors to use for their research, each with a backstory that influences how they perform.
I like that analogy. It's a good one.
But wouldn't they need tons of these backstories? To cover every kind of person they might want to study?
Well, this is where it gets even crazier. They actually use other LLMs to generate the backstories.
Wait, so the AI is writing the bios for the AI? That's whoa.
Haha, right. It's super efficient. They can create this huge anthology of backstories, covering all sorts of backgrounds and everything.
Okay, but how do they make sure those AI-generated stories aren't just nonsense?
That's a good point. They've got algorithms to match the virtual personas to the actual demographics of the people they're trying to represent.
Oh, that's clever. It's like they're casting directors picking the right AI actor for each study.
Exactly.
Okay, but the big question, does this anthology thing actually work?
Well, they put it to the test. They replicated real surveys from, the Q Research Center, that American Trends panel.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like the gold standard, right? And the results were really impressive.
So they compared their AI's answers to the real data from actual people.
Yeah, Anthology consistently beat the other methods for creating virtual personas. The answers were way closer to what real humans said, both in what they said and the patterns of, how people answer those different types of questions.
So it's not just believable, but it's also consistent with how we actually think.
Precisely. And there's one more thing that's really exciting. It was especially good at simulating answers from groups that are usually underrepresented in research.
Now that is fascinating. What do you mean by underrepresented? And how did it perform in those cases?
Well, let's take age as an example. When they focused on, say, the 18 to 49 age group, Anthology's answers were super close to the real human data from that demographic.
Oh, wow. So it's particularly good at representing younger generations.
It seems that way, and it makes you wonder how these LLMs are learning and processing information.
That is a lot to think about. We're talking AI that could stand in for people in studies. It's mind-boggling. What's met out to you so far?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. For me, it's the impact this could have on how research is done in the future. Imagine testing ideas and running surveys way faster and cheaper.
Right. But there's also the big question of ethics, right? I mean, if we can create these virtual people that are so convincing.
Definitely. It's something we need to explore really carefully.
Yeah. I mean, where do we draw the line between simulation and reality?
It's a big question, but I think it's safe to say this research is a huge step forward, both in understanding AI and ourselves, really.
That's a good point. I'm definitely eager to hear more about what this means for research moving forward.
Well, let's dive into that next time. One of the really exciting things about this is how it could make research more inclusive, you know?
You're talking about how Anthology can represent those groups that are usually left out of studies, right?
Yeah, exactly. But why is that so important? I mean, wouldn't it be helpful to just have lots of different virtual participants, even if they weren't, like, perfectly accurate?
Well, yeah, I guess diversity is always good, but I'm starting to see what you mean. If research usually misses certain groups,
Right. It leads to data that's biased. The conclusions might not apply to everyone.
like those medical studies that mostly used men, right? Or research that didn't really include different cultures and communities, it's like you're missing pieces of the whole picture.
Exactly. If Anthology can simulate those groups that are usually overlooked, it could help fix those mistakes from the past.
It's like giving everyone a voice, right? Even if it's a virtual one.
You got it. And it's not just about fairness, it's about getting a complete picture of how people behave. If you only study a small part of the population,
You're missing out on a lot of information.
yeah, for sure. So instead of just copying the biases we already have, this technology could help us see past them.
So we can get a more accurate and inclusive view of the world.
That's the idea. Think about it, running studies with virtual participants that actually represent the real world, all those different experiences.
That would be incredible. What kind of impact could that have on, things beyond research?
Oh, tons of things. Designing better products, making public health campaigns that actually connect with different communities.
It's amazing to think about. But I do wonder, how far can we really take this? The paper also mentions using these virtual personas for marketing and product development.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Is there a risk that it could create these, unrealistic expectations? Or even reinforce stereotypes? I mean, the AI is learning from data, right? And that data often has bias built into it.
That's a really important point. We need to be super careful about how this is used, especially in those areas.
Yeah.
Because you're right, if we aren't careful, we could end up with these virtual personas that are just repeating harmful stereotypes or catering to a very narrow view of, what people supposedly want.
So it comes down to using it responsibly.
Absolutely. We have to have these open conversations about what could happen and make sure it's used ethically.
Yeah. It's not just about how efficient AI is, it's about making sure it's not making inequality worse.
Exactly. The goal is to use this to create a more inclusive and equitable world, not just to, make more money or give more power to the people who already have it.
So it's like walking a tightrope.
It is, yeah. But I think we can find that balance. We've faced ethical challenges with new technologies before.
We have?
And we've figured out ways to adapt. This isn't any different, really. It's about being thoughtful and taking action early on.
That makes sense. But this feels bigger than just regulating some new software. This is about what it means to be human in a world with really advanced AI.
It is, yeah.
If we can create these virtual personas that are so believable, what does that say about us? Are we just like data points that algorithms can copy and control?
That's a deep question. And honestly, I don't think there's a simple answer. It's something we need to keep exploring and thinking about. And it's important we have these conversations now before this technology gets so big that we forget about the human side of things.
So as much as we're excited about the potential, we need to keep asking these tough questions to make sure we're using this to understand ourselves better, not to lose sight of what makes us human.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, embracing the new stuff, but also protecting our values.
Yeah.
And I think if we're careful and we talk openly about it, we can navigate all this in a responsible and ethical way.
It's really interesting, we're talking about the future of research, but it feels like we're also talking about the future of humanity.
It does, doesn't it?
It's about who we are, how we interact with technology, and what it means to live in a world where the lines between what's real and what's virtual are getting blurrier and blurrier.
That's a great way to put it. This technology is kind of like a mirror, showing us how complex we are, but also what we're capable of. And it's up to us to decide what we see in that reflection and how we want to move forward.
What do you think about all this, listener? Does it feel exciting, overwhelming, or a bit of both? I'm still processing everything, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
I think it's normal to have mixed feelings. This is groundbreaking stuff, and it challenges how we see the world in some really profound ways. But it's also an amazing chance to learn and to grow and to create a future where technology helps us, not controls us.
Well said. Okay, before we get too deep into philosophy here, I want to go back to something from the paper. We've talked about how Anthology is good at representing younger generations.
Yeah.
What do you think that tells us about how these LLMs are actually learning and evolving?
It is a fascinating question. Maybe the data they're trained on leans towards younger people. Or maybe it's just how they process language. It aligns with younger communication styles.
Yeah, it's almost like these LLMs are becoming anthropologists, studying how we behave and think.
That's a cool way to think about it, and it really highlights how important it is to be careful about what data we use to train them.
Right.
If we want them to show us how rich and diverse humanity is, we need to make sure that the data itself is diverse. Otherwise, we're just creating a narrow, distorted view.
It reminds us that this is still early days for this tech. We have a lot of work to do to make sure it's used the right way.
Absolutely. But it's exciting to imagine where this could lead. The possibilities are huge.
It feels like we're at this crossroads. It's not just about some new software. We're talking about tools that could change how we see ourselves, how we see the whole world around us.
It is a big shift, and I think we need to be honest, it's not all going to be easy. I mean, as we build these AI systems, they're getting so advanced.
Yeah.
We have to really think about how they could change, how we see what's real, how we relate to each other, even our sense of self.
Right, it could be really easy to misuse this technology.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to talk about it, to have these ethical guidelines,
Yeah.
We need to be having these conversations right now while it's still kind of early. That way we can make sure it's developed in a way that's good for everyone.
It feels like a lot of responsibility, and it's not just on the researchers or the tech companies, right? It feels like this is a conversation everyone needs to be part of.
I agree. It's our collective responsibility to make sure AI is used for good. And I think that starts with, educating people, raising awareness. The more people understand how this stuff works, the better we'll be at dealing with all the ethical and societal stuff that comes with it.
Totally. We need to take the mystery out of AI, move past all the hype and fear, and just have real conversations about what it can do and what it can't.
Right.
That way we can make smart decisions about how we want to use it in our lives, in our world.
And I think it's also important to remember that, AI is basically a reflection of us.
Oh, that's interesting.
It comes from human creativity, human ingenuity, and just like any tool, it can be used in good ways or bad ways. The choice is really up to us.
And that choice, it starts with asking the right questions, the questions we've been talking about today, understanding how powerful this technology is, but also knowing its limits, thinking about the consequences, the things we want to happen and the things we don't.
We need to approach all of this with, a sense of curiosity, but also with caution. We need to be open to learning new things, to adapting, and we have to commit to using these tools in a way that aligns with our values.
Even with all the challenges and potential problems we talked about, I still feel hopeful.
Me too. I really believe we can use AI for good, to learn more about ourselves and the world, to solve some of the biggest problems we're facing, to create a better future for everyone.
That's a big goal, but it's a good one to work towards. And it all starts with conversations like this, with open minds, and with a willingness to learn from each other.
I agree. It's been great talking about all this with you.
Likewise. And to you, our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as interesting and thought-provoking as we did. And as you keep exploring the world of AI, remember to keep asking those questions, stay informed, and be part of those important conversations that will shape all our futures. Until next time.